Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to Mountain Empire Community College. So glad to have you here this morning, and welcome to our 49th annual John Fox Jr. Literary Festival. My name is Amy Greer, and I serve as the Vice President for Institutional Advancement here at MECC. It's my pleasure to welcome you this morning and welcome our New York Times best-selling author, Jeannette Walls. We've been so fortunate. I just spent the last 30 minutes with Miss Walls and a high school class from John I. Burton High School that is here. And she has a wonderful story to tell, so encouraging. And I'm very, very honored that she has chosen to be here with us today. Um, just so you know, to our knowledge, the John Fox Jr. Literary Festival is the longest running literary festival in the state of Virginia. I think that's really amazing. You know, here we are in Big Stone Gap, Virginia, tiny little town, and we've been celebrating our culture for years and years and years. Before it was, we were country before country was cool, right? So next year will be our 50th year milestone, and that's a testament, I think, to preserving our cultural heritage of our region. And we do that through programs like today's, but also through Home Craft Days, our Mountain Music School program. And if you're not familiar with those things, come and talk to me after, and I'll school you on our wonderful cultural offerings here at Mountain Empire. If you have a chance today, go visit our library in Robb Hall. Right now, we have an exhibit of photography by local photographer Bill Harris of his recent trip to Africa, as well as a handmade quilt display. So, we try to keep a rotating exhibit of art on our campus. It's really important for our students to know and appreciate where they're from and who they are and the history of this region and our rich cultural heritage of this region. Before the program begins, I want to extend appreciation to those who have helped organize this event. First, I want to thank the MECC Foundation, that's who I work for, and the Cultural and Humanities Committee for the Mountain Empire Community College Foundation. It's chaired by Miss Lena Grace, and thank you to those folks for helping with the program today. I'd also like to thank the Lonesome Pine Arts and Craft Organization and its members for sponsoring our literary contest. The Lonesome Pine Arts and Crafts Group has been an event sponsor since the inception of the festival, and we are so grateful to this organization for their continued annual support of our prizes for contest winners. We also want to thank the famous Fox House ladies. If you're going to lunch today, you're in for a treat. I thought we were going to have a brawl over tickets for the luncheon. Our author is really important, but the lunch at the Fox House is equally important. I think it's one of the best things about Big Stone Gap. And if you get to come today, I'm so happy for you. Those tickets are hard to come by. Most of all, I would like to thank and congratulate the individuals who submitted entries to our short story and poetry contest. All of our entries are winners, and we had some amazing entries this year. I know personally, I think when I was a teenager, all I wanted to do was be an author when I grew up. I wanted to write something. But I was so, I guess, embarrassed or nervous, ashamed about my writing. It takes a lot of courage to submit your writing to a contest and have other people read and grade your work. So, congratulations for the courage to write something down and submit it and have other people read it. That's a brave act, especially in today's world. Thank you. Okay. At your seats, you'll find copies of the winning entries to our short story and poetry contest. Please take a copy with you as you go, and if you'd like additional copies, just let us know. It is a great honor to be part of this festival, which for almost half a century has highlighted Appalachian writers, artists who are keeping our culture, our heritage, our language, and our traditions alive. Appalachian artists, authors are artists capturing the world of yesterday and today and beyond. I first read Jeannette Walls' Glass Castle when it was first released, and although I did not experience the poverty that Miss Wells' novel depicts, her writing resonated with me about life in a coal town, right? But more importantly, the resilience that is required to find the opportunities to grow beyond your circumstances. Miss Walls depicts the Appalachia as I knew it, beautiful, complicated, and a place that evokes a range of emotions, a deep love, sometimes an anger, immense pride, and even sorrow. I hope that if you haven't familiarized yourself with Miss Walls or the Appalachian genre of literature, that today's event will inspire you to discover the world of James Steele, Wendell Berry, Lee Smith, my favorite, John Fox Jr., Sharon McCrum, Barbara Kingsolver, Ron Rash, Silas House, Adriana Trigiani, the list goes on and on. We are a force. Remember that. I thank you for your time today, and I hope you enjoy this special event. At this time, I'm going to ask Dr. Clint Pinion, Mountain Empire Community College's Vice President for Academic and Workforce Solutions, to come to the podium and introduce our author for today. Thank you.
Good morning. All right, we gotta get the energy up for this great author. Good morning. Thank you. I appreciate that. I really can't tell you how pleased I am to get to introduce our guest speaker today. I mean, if you've listened or read the books, they're phenomenal and they tell a story of overcoming some really adverse events. And I think that's important when you think about some of the students that we serve here at Mountain Empire, the folks that call us home. They too experience some of those similar events in their lives, and yet they're still resilient. And so I do think that we have to acknowledge that Miss Walls really gives a voice sometimes to folks who feel voiceless or unseen. Please help me by giving a warm Southwest Virginia welcome to Miss Jeannette Walls. Jeannette Walls, who is originally from Phoenix and grew up, ta-da, uh, and grew up moving around the country with her family, is the best-selling author of The Glass Castle, a memoir that recounts her dysfunctional and nomadic upbringing. The Glass Castle has been a New York Times bestseller for over 8 years and was named one of the top 10 books by Amazon for the decade. In 2017, The Glass Castle was made into a movie starring Brie Larson, Woody Harrelson, and Naomi Watts. Walls is also the author of two other New York Times bestsellers, The Silver Star and Half Broke Horses, which was named one of the best books of 2009 by the New York Times Book Review. Walls was the recipient of the Christopher Award, the Books for Better Living Award, and the American Library Association's Alex Award. Her newest book, Hang the Moon, was published in March 2023 and was named a Library Reads pick for March 2023 and most anticipated book of 2023 by Oprah Daily, Elle, and LitHub. So if Oprah chooses it, you know it's good stuff. Held as one of the world's most gifted storytellers, Walls has been sharing her remarkable story of resilience and redemption with audiences since The Glass Castle was first published in 2005. Her memoir documents her and her siblings' unconventional upbringing, detailing a childhood spent in extreme poverty and chaos with parents who, despite their flaws, taught them to embrace life fearlessly. She continues to captivate audiences with her incredible story and offers a unique perspective on how to overcome unimaginable obstacles, confront challenges, and pursue a life of authenticity. Walls graduated from Barnard College, which she was able to attend through a combination of grants, scholarships, and a year spent answering phones on Wall Street. She has written for New York Magazine, Esquire, and MSNBC, and has appeared on The Today Show, Primetime, and The Colbert Report. After many years in New York, Walls currently lives with her husband in rural Virginia. So now we can officially welcome Miss Walls to the stage.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Can y'all hear me okay? Great. Thank you so much. It is such an honor to be here. I'm really humbled. I feel it's an honor I don't completely deserve. I'm just a woman with a past. I'm a woman with a story. But the telling of that story has hugely changed my life. And I think I've learned a lot, often from readers such as yourself. So, what I'd like to do with our time together this morning is share with you some of the lessons that I have learned. Um, it is ironic that it gives me such joy to be standing here because for so long my story is a source of shame for me. I used to write about celebrities for a living. That's not the source of shame. I know it should be, but it's not. In fact, I thought I was pretty hot. I used to live on Park Avenue. I went on television discussing important issues like who Lindsay Lohan's really dating. And I was going to some fabulous celebrity party, and I'm all decked out in my fabulous designer clothes. And my taxi got stuck in traffic a couple of blocks away from the party. Um, I looked out the window and I saw a homeless woman rooting through the garbage. And to most New Yorkers, she just looked like your average run of the mill homeless woman. But I got a good look at her and I realized it was my mother. And I was overwhelmed then, not by compassion, but by fear, because I was afraid my secret would get out. The fact I was living on Park Avenue, going on television discussing celebrities, and my mother and father were homeless on the streets of New York City. So, to my eternal shame, I slid down in the back of the taxi and I asked the driver to take me home. Once I got home, I paced around the apartment and I looked in the mirror and I didn't much like the person I saw there. She struck me as quite the hypocrite. I got together with my mom a couple of days later. I said, "Ma, what the heck am I supposed to tell people if they ask me about you?" And she looked at me as though I'd asked her a really stupid question. And she said, "Tell the truth." She said, "That's simple enough. Just tell the truth." I thought, I could never do that. It's too weird. Nobody would get it. And beyond that, I was completely convinced that if people knew the truth about me, that I would lose everything. I'd get fired from my job. I'd lose what few friends I had and this meager little standing that I'd worked so hard to carve out for myself. At the same time, I felt it was something I had to do. Um, it just wasn't right. I'd spent my life trying to tell the truth, and here I was hiding the truth about myself. So I sat down and I thought about my earliest memory. We were living in a trailer, not a big old fancy double wide, but a little trailer like you tow with a car, somewhere in the desert. And my I was cooking for myself at age 3. My mother's an artist, and she didn't much care for domestic chores, so we kids were kind of left to fend for ourselves. And I was wearing a little pink dress that stuck out, and it caught on fire. I was taken to the hospital, and I have such vivid memories of that hospital because I'd never seen a place that was so clean. And they fed you 3 times a day, and they changed your sheets even when they weren't all that dirty. But after 6 weeks in the hospital, my father rescued me. He scooped me up in his arms and ran off and jumped into the waiting car, and we sped off. Dad called that sort of thing doing the skedaddle. When I was growing up, we were all the time doing the skedaddle. We were all the time on the run. Sometimes there were sirens blaring behind us. Dad said it was the cops and the CIA and the mafia were out to get him. Mom said it was bill collectors, but whoever, we were just all the time on the run. And would sleep in cars and would sleep in cardboard boxes and would sleep on the beach until the cops chased us away. Um, but Dad said all this running around was temporary, that one of these days he was going to build for us a great big mansion, and he called it the glass castle. It was going to have glass walls and glass ceiling, and it was going to be solar heated. And all Dad had to do was find gold, and then he was going to build us our glass castle. Well, alcoholism and a few other issues kept getting in the way. When I was about 10 years old, we moved to Welch, West Virginia, McDowell County, and times got really tough for us there. Um, we moved in with my father's parents, and they kicked us out. And then we moved into a little shack. And I'm not exaggerating when I said shack. It had no indoor plumbing. It had no heat. It was wired for electricity, but we usually didn't pay the bills. And I grew up reading by candlelight and kerosene light, and when we could afford batteries, flashlight. Um, but I honestly believe that despite what my parents didn't give me, they gave me great gifts. You know, times did get tough there. I will admit. I mean, there were a couple of occasions we didn't have food, and I would stay late at school. I became the editor of the school newspaper, and one of the great things is I could stay late, and I would root around in the garbage for something to eat. So I credit teachers for letting me be the editor of the school newspaper, for singling me out and giving me credit to that I wasn't just a troublemaker. But I also give my parents a lot of credit. I believe that they gave us great gifts, despite all they didn't give us. They gave us a sense of self esteem and a love of education. And I think if you have that love of education, that sense of self esteem, you can do just about anything. Um, they also taught me how to do the skedaddle. So when my oldest sister was 16-year-old and I was 13, we hatched a plan. She moved to New York City. I followed her. And I got into a pretty good school and life became kind of normal. It was sort of weird. We had electricity, we paid the bills, I ate, and I'm going to school one day. I'm listening to the radio, and the DJs are laughing because some van had broken down on the FDR Drive, and all the contents had spilled on the street. And the dog was playing Keep Away with the Cops, and the DJs thought it was hilarious, and they were making Beverly Hillbilly jokes. But my heart kind of seized up because I thought, that poor family, I hope they'll be okay. That was the sort of thing that was always happening to us when I was growing up. Then later on in the day, I get a call from my mother. She said, "Jenny Kunz, it's your mom. Your dad and I have moved to New York City." I said, "Ma, did your van break down on the FDR Drive?" She said, "How did you know?" I said, "Oh man, it was on the radio." And she took this as a really good sign because they just moved to New York City and already she's kind of famous. She thought her career was really going to take off here. Um, it gives me no pride to admit I wanted nothing to do with them. You know, they moved in with my older sister. They caught her place on fire. They moved into their van. It caught on fire. Then they moved onto the streets. And by this time, my career had taken off a little bit. I was going on television um, and discussing Tom Cruise, and my father was going on television discussing the plight of homeless people. And I was afraid somebody was going to put two and two together and figure out that that was my father. And I thought I could be the woman from nowhere, the woman without a past. But the past has a funny way of catching up with you. And it did on that day that mom either challenged me or gave me permission to tell the truth. So I sat down and thought about this here truth that I wanted to tell. Now, anybody with siblings who's compared notes about your childhood knows that the truth is not hard and fast. That sometimes I see some nodding going on there. Y'all know what I'm talking about. I sat down and thought about my own truth, my own past. And I thought about my very favorite memory from my entire childhood. I was 5 years old. We had no money for Christmas presents. And my father took each of his children out, had us look up in the sky and choose whatever star we wanted. I've never been very subtle. I chose the brightest one. Dad explained to me that wasn't a star at all. It was a planet. That was Venus. I wanted it anyway. Dad said, "What the hell? It's Christmas. You want a planet? You got a planet." And he gave me Venus. And it is my most treasured gift ever. To this day, I look up for Venus every single night and say, "That is mine, honey. I own that." I love that gift so much. And I love that story so much that I told a story at my father's funeral. Now, after I finished telling the story, my oldest sister Lori, a lot smarter than me, always saw right through my dad's BS. She folds her arms and said, "Isn't that like that sorry SOB dad of ours to go give away something that doesn't belong to him in the first place?" And I thought about that a whole lot while I was trying to tell the truth. Because Lori's absolutely right. Dad's giving away Venus was a completely meaningless gesture. But I'm right too. It was a priceless treasure. Meanwhile, my brother does a hilarious impersonation of dad being drunk and giving away stars and planets and galaxies. So you have one incident and you have three stories, all of which are true. And I think that, our truths are less about what happened and how we choose to tell the story. I hope that in the process of telling my story, I learned some of the things I should have learned a long time ago. When I was about 4 years old, I thought I heard a monster under my bed. And I went and told my dad, Dad, I think there's a monster. And I half expected him to say, honey, there's no such thing. I go back to sleep. I still would have been afraid. Instead, he says, was it a wicked looking creature with these great big old long sharp teeth? I said, how'd you know? He says, oh, that sounds like old demon. Old demon's been after me for years, but now I guess he realizes Rex Walls don't scare so easy. So he's going after my kids. Let's go get him. So Dad gets out his hunting knife and gives me a pipe wrench, and we go look for old demon. We couldn't find him. Dad's cussing up a blue streak, and I'm getting a swing of things. Come here, demon. I'm not scared of you. No demon. Dad sits me down and says, honey, just like that old demon, he's a bully. And like most bullies, he's a coward. And the thing you got to do with old demon is you look him in the eye and you let him know you're not afraid, and he turns tail and runs. Well, of course, what Dad was trying to tell me was to face my fears. And I've always thought of myself as a brave person, but it took me much of my life, most of my life, to realize the time and energy that I was spending running from this demon that I'd created, this past of mine. And I've come to realize how wise my crazy drunken daddy could be. That, you run from these things in your past, they will pursue you. But the truth is, you are stronger than them. And if you reach a place in your life where you can turn around and confront your demons, not only can they not hurt you, if you're as lucky as I've been, you put a harness on your demon and you put him to work for you. Because I've come to believe that so often these things about ourselves that we think make us less of a person are the best thing we have going for us. Back when I was keeping real quiet about my past, because I thought people would look down at me for it, I'd made friends with a really, really well-to-do woman, and she wanted to go on vacation. We're not talking about just some money. She had houses in Switzerland and stuff like that. And so I thought, well, that'd be kind of interesting to go on vacation with a super rich person. So I said, what'd you have in mind? And she wanted to go on something called Outward Bound. Now, I'd never heard of this here Outward Bound thing. And she explains to me that you pay a rather substantial amount of money and you go out into the wilderness and you forage for food. And I didn't want to say anything, but I'm thinking, honey, the first 17 years of my life were in Outward Bound. And I called up my brother. I said, Brian, you are not going to believe this. Rich people got to pay for their hardships. And we thought that was the funniest thing we'd ever heard until I got to know this woman better. And she is so strong and so resilient, but she doesn't know that. And that is the gift that people who are raised like me get. Is that we're tough. We can fight. What our issue, or at least what my issue was, is valuing myself and understanding that I was as good as the rich kids. And that is why I'm such a huge fan of storytelling. Um, I used to just be so focused on what people thought of me that I wasn't able to listen to other people's stories. And as such, I'll tell you, I decided one day after I thought I'd made it in New York City, like I said, it was on television, all that, I decided to go back to this town in McDowell County where I'd grown up, the poorest in a poor town. And I'd show them what a sophisticated New Yorker I've become. Y'all can tell from my sophisticated New York accent. So I put on my most fancy designer clothes and I decided to eat at this restaurant that I'd always been kind of intimidated to go to because it struck me as fancy dancy. It was a coffee shop, but everything is relative. So I put on my fancy clothes and I sashay in thinking I'm all that. I take a seat at a prominent booth and the waitress comes over and she looked maybe 30ish and like she might have had a kind of tough life, but I wasn't focused on her. I was focused on what she thought of me. And she says, can I help you? And I'm looking at the menu, and the menu says special today fish. Now, I knew from having eaten at fancy dancy restaurants in New York City that how the waiter comes over and the special today is a lovely Chilean sea bass with caramelized crust, whatever. So, so I said, yes, what is the fish? Now, I was being a jerk. I knew darn good and well what the fish was. It wasn't some lovely Chilean sea bass with a caramelized, a little square piece of fish with breadcrumbs. It was fish sticks, which happens to be my favorite fish anyway. But I was trying to humiliate the waitress into saying, oh, this is not a fancy restaurant like you're obviously used to eating at, so that I could feel superior. So, yes, what is the fish? And she said, excuse me? And I said, the menu says special today fish. What is the fish? She looks at me to see if she'd heard what I just asked, and then she looks around to see if anybody else had heard what I just asked, and then she explains to me sort of slow and careful so I can understand her. The fish is an animal which swims through the water. So here I am trying to impress her with sophisticated New Yorker I am, and she's thinking, make them pretty dumb where you come from, huh? You know? Um, I was trying to be a snob and I failed miserably. But if I would have succeeded, the only thing I would have succeeded in doing is making her feel bad about herself. And I wouldn't have felt any better about myself. And that's one of the many lessons I hope that I have learned from having told my story. When I sat down to tell my story, I thought, why am I doing this? Like I said, I was completely convinced that I would be met with shame and humiliation, and then I developed a hope and a fantasy for my story. I never dreamed of the bestseller list or a movie. People ask me, is this a dream come true for you? I'd have to be a crazy person to dream this, that like, oh yeah, I hope I'm lecturing in front of students one day. No, 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 no. My dream for my raggedy little story is that one day a rich kid would read it. Um, any writer who tells you they don't have a fantasy for this story is lying to you, because it's an excruciating process. And as the process got more excruciating, I developed a bolder and more ambitious hope for it. And that is that one day somebody who grew up like I did would read it. And that somebody would get a sense of hope, the way that I got from reading a book called A Tree Grows in Brooklyn when I was around 10 years old. And, I didn't have a lot of friends in school, but little Francie Nolan in A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, she and I, her dad was a drunk and she loved reading and she made it out because of reading. And I have been humbled and overwhelmed by how people understand this story. And not long after publication, um, I was approached by a young woman, long blonde hair, fancy area. She said, I read your story while my family was vacationing in the Caribbean. I thought, oh, there's my rich kid. And she said, there's a girl in my class and she always wears these ugly, out of date clothes. And me and all the other cheerleaders always make fun of her. And now I understand, and I will never make fun of her again. And I thought, the Lord can strike me down with lightning right now because I've done my job on this planet. And I've made that one child understand. But not long after that, I was approached by a young man, tough area. He said, I hate reading and I hate books, but I liked your story. And I said, if you hate books and reading, why did you like this one? He thinks for a minute. He said, that there's a fine white trash story. And the woman behind him said, I believe that was meant as a compliment. But I took it as a compliment. In fact, it might have been one of the greatest compliments I've ever received. Because, if somebody who thinks of himself as trash, which he clearly did, can hear your story, can read your story, and think of themselves differently. And then if a cheerleader, a popular cheerleader, can read the same story and think of others differently, that, my friends, is why we tell our stories. I think that we memoirists get a little bit of a bum rap. People think that we're exhibitionists out there. Oh, please feel sorry for me. And that's not it at all. What we're saying is, this is what I went through. And maybe you can learn something from it without the nasty business of going through it. I had a young woman approach me in a rough inner city area, and she said, Miss Walls, I want to be honest with you. I didn't want to, when your book was assigned to me, I said, I didn't want to read about no West Virginia hillbilly, but girlfriend, you and I could be sisters. And that's why we tell our stories. It is to make these connections. We might look different, we might come from different parts of the country, different parts of the world, but behind the facades, we're all the same. We all want to feel safe and loved and protected. And by hearing other people's stories, we make that connection. I a teacher. I've been so honored that teachers have assigned my book. It is the best thing that has ever happened in a life in which many wonderful things have happened. But this teacher told me, she said there was a girl in her classroom. She said, she's a good girl, but she's had a few brushes with the law. And I was hoping that your story would resonate with her a little bit. And she assigns my book to her, my memoir. And this young woman, she comes back to class, she slams the book down on the desk. She says, that is a very upsetting book to me. And the teacher said, why is that? And she said, there's a scene in that book where the mother takes 3 children to go shoplifting for one of the kids, and that is just wrong. And this teacher is saying, oh, this is great. I can have a conversation with this young woman about crime and punishment and all those fun topics like that. And she said, what in particular bothered you about that scene? And this young woman says, when you go shoplifting for one of the kids, you got to get something for all of them. And the teacher said, we had quite the eye-opening conversation. She said, I'd always thought of this young woman as a rule breaker. But after that conversation, I realized she was just taught a different set of rules. And so that again is why I believe that we share our stories, is that, you know, we all come to stories with our own story. And I've had a married couple tell me the the wife said my story was so upsetting she threw up while reading it. The husband said he thought it was the funniest thing he'd ever read. And they're both right. So, we all bring our story to anybody else's story. And by comparing notes and sharing what we think of that story, we reveal our own stories. I After I finished writing The Glass Castle, like I said, I thought I'd get fired. I didn't. I go back out onto the red carpet, sticking microphones into celebrities' faces, asking them who designed their outfits. And a rather well-known woman who I will not name, she asked me to turn off my microphone. She wanted to talk to me off the record. She said, I want to thank you for being so honest about your story. My father's also an alcoholic. And I bought several copies of your book to give to friends who do not understand how I could love somebody who's done such horrible things. And I thought, dang it, I can't write anything mean about this person again. So I didn't get fired, but I got defanged. I um I believe that the truth will set you free. I believe in truth telling, but and I prided myself in being accurate, but what is accurate is not necessarily what's true. And you get deeper into these stories, everybody has such a complicated, beautiful story. I'm not knocking celebrity journalism, I just didn't want to do it anymore. But but I have a problem. I got one slim little talent in the world. I'm really nosy. I love stories. But I quit my celebrity reporting job. My husband and I moved to Virginia. Um, my mother was homeless at this point. She was living on the street. The abandoned building where she'd been living for a while burned down, and she was back on the streets. And I said, Mom, why don't you come live with us? Not with us, because I'm not a saint. We got a place out back. I'll put you in. And she says, I'm not a moocher. I'm not a charity case. And I said, Mom, you're living on the streets. And she goes, I can take care of myself. I said, I'm thinking of getting horses and I could really use your help. And she said, I'll be right there. And it was such a valuable lesson that there's a type of person who puts their sense of self-esteem and independence even before they put their comfort and even their security. And I used to be one of those people. And if somebody came by and told me, I can help you, you can't live like that, I would say, I can do whatever, I set my mind to. And Mom surprised me. She was great with the horses. She turned them loose a few times because she thought they should be free. She said, "Don't worry, they'll come back. They have it really good here. They know it," and they did. Um, so I started touring on behalf of the Glass Castle. It was readers who kept saying, "You should write about your mother. You should write your mother's story. I understand your father. Your mother's a mystery to me. Why would somebody who has the resources to lead a normal life lead the life that she chose?" And I didn't invite Mom to come live with us for the purpose of exploiting her, but as long as she's there, what the heck? So I said, Ma, how would you feel about my telling your story? And she was all for it, but she said it shouldn't be about her. It should be about her mother, my grandmother, Lily Casey Smith, who was a foul-mouthed, gun-toting, hooch-selling, um, horse-breaking school teacher. And she wasn't just a school teacher. She drove the school bus, which wasn't a school bus. It was a hearse with the word school bus painted on the side, and it was all the time getting stuck in the mud. And she'd make the students get out and push. And while they were pushing, she'd have them recite Hail Marys. And she'd say, push and pray, kids, push and pray. So it's become a little bit of a philosophy for me. I love that, push and pray, because I believe in prayer and optimism and all that positive thinking stuff. But I also believe in pushing and doing that hard work that needs to be done. So I wrote the book about me, and I wrote the book about my mother, and I wrote Silver Star, which is kind of based on other people I knew. And people kept on telling me, readers kept saying, you should write fiction, you should write fiction. I'm like, no, no, no. I am a reporter. I'm a truth teller. I don't make things up. Readers are smarter than I am. This is one of the reasons I love talking to them. They'll push me on things that I don't understand. They'll take me out of the box the way I think. And so many people told me that I should write fiction that I thought like, well, maybe they're onto something. But I didn't even know where to begin. Like I thought of fictionalizing the Glass Castle originally, but what was I supposed to change? Was I supposed to make it weirder or less weird? I didn't know where to go with it. But I thought, yeah, I've already milked that cow dry with my family. I don't know what else to report on. So maybe I will try this here fiction thing, but I didn't really know where to start. Um I wanted kind of for a while there was something that fascinated me, and I was kind of exploring the topic of it. When I was about 6 years old, I just remember this so vividly. I was sitting at the kitchen table, and there was a vase of flowers on the table, and I picked it up. Like many of the people in this room, I was with kind of a kid who would read anything with words on it, and on that day, it was this vase, and I turned it around. And it said, Federal law forbids selling or reuse of this bottle. I said, Ma, we got to throw out the flowers. And she said, What are you talking about? I said, We're breaking the law. We got to throw out the flowers. And and she takes it and she looks at it and she goes, Oh, that's a stupid law. You can ignore that. What are you talking about? How do you know stupid laws? When she goes, and she told me about prohibition. And I was fascinated because, at this time, nobody was allowed to drink alcohol. It was against the law. Well, you could drink it, but you couldn't buy it or make it or whatever. So I wanted to live during this wondrous time when it was against the law to buy alcohol. I thought all of our problems would be solved. And Mom said, "Oh, it was a disaster." She said, "Prices went through the roof, violence went through the roof, and it didn't solve alcoholism." And I wasn't sure she was right, but my father ran liquor, so I was very interested in this period. But I didn't like, how do you make stuff up? I wasn't even really sure about this. But while I was trying to chew on all this, the Glass Castle got it. It had been optioned for a movie around the time it came out, but it kept on being in turnaround. But finally, they were casting it, and they told me that they'd cast Woody Harrelson as my dad. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird casting. He didn't look that much like dad, but I guess it didn't matter that much because nobody knows what dad looked like except for me. So, but even before I'd met him, he called me a couple of times and he wanted to get Rex. He wanted to get Rex, and he started asking all these really what I thought was interesting, very direct questions, like when he talked to you, did he look you in the eye? And when he talked to you, what did he do with his hands? I said, he crushed beer cans, not wimpy beer cans like they have now, but back when a beer can was a beer can. And he said, like Cool Hand Luke. And I said, my dad was Cool Hand Luke. For you youngsters, that was a Paul Newman movie. And Woody says, that's my favorite movie. And he really liked that. And he kept on asking about Dad's walk. He said, can you describe Dad's walk? I said, well, he had a kind of long-legged, lean-hipped walk. And Woody said, I don't know what that means. And I said, well, I guess because it doesn't mean anything. So I'm clomping around the office trying to describe my dad's walk, right? I'm like, clomp, clomp. And he could hear me clomp, and he said, I wish I could see him. Like, no, you don't. I look like RuPaul. I can't do dad's walk. And um, so I said, Chuck Yeager, Sam Shepard really nailed Chuck Yeager's walk in The Right Stuff. So if you look at that, and again, he really liked that. It became obvious to me he really liked things to kind of copy, or copy's the wrong word, but to base his character on. So I spent some time on the set of the Glass Castle movie, and it was so fascinating to me. And they filmed the most complicated scene of the day first thing in the morning. They don't do it sequentially. And the first day I showed up, they were filming the scene in which Brie Larson, that would be me, was thinking of leaving home, and the father, Woody Harrelson, was trying to convince her to stay. And the first time I saw Woody Harrelson, I burst into tears. I could not believe it. He had the cigarette behind his ear, he had the posture, he had the friggin' facial muscles, he had the walk, my friends, he had the walk, and I couldn't believe it. And so they're arguing about whether or not she's saying I'm going to leave home, and he's trying to get her to stay. And then they went off script. And Woody started saying things that that my father had said that I had not told him. And I completely lost it. I was a basket case. I was slinging snot. It was like, oh, it was bad. And I'm literally on the floor. They wrap that shot and they go and Woody sees me there sobbing. And he comes over to me and I knew he wasn't dad. Okay, I'm not that stupid, but I start apologizing to him. I'm sorry, but I'm sorry. And and in my father's voice, he says to me, "You had to do it, honey. You had to leave, or we wouldn't be here today." And it was one of those magical moments that, like, sometimes life gives you what you think you're not gonna. I was able to apologize to dad in a way and hear his forgiveness, but it also really hit me. That is what this fiction writing stuff is about, if you can pull it off. I don't put myself in Woody Harrelson's category, but it is giving voice to people who are not there. It is understanding characters so well that you know what they would say. So I revisited this fiction that I was trying to write. And I wrote about prohibition, and I found an event that I kind of hung it on. I still clung very tightly to facts, which is where I feel comfortable. But the longer I live and the more I read, the more convinced I am that most writing is to some degree autobiographical, even if it's science fiction or historical fiction. People put you, we write what we know, we bring our agenda, we bring our what we love, what we care about into our writing. But there was a case in Franklin County, Virginia. It was Franklin County, as some of you might know, was considered. Uh, it was the moonshine capital of America, and after Prohibition, there was an investigation of what the heck happened, and they produced more moonshine than any comparable area in America. And there was a trial, and it was the longest trial in Virginia, so there was great material there, and the main character was a woman rum runner. For my book was a woman rum runner, which I would not have done if there wasn't a historical precedent. If there was Willie Carter Sharp, who didn't have that much um, written about her. I thought, oh, I'll just read some diaries of moonshiners. Guess what, folks? They weren't keeping diaries, and and I I was fascinated by the 1920s. I thought it'd be this great period of flappers and everybody's reading Hemingway. And when we read about the 20s, we're usually reading about it from an urban lens and trying to research it from a rural lens. There wasn't a lot to be found, and especially among these liquor makers who had been vilified in so many ways. And it was fascinating to me because these people were doing something that they'd done for generations, that they'd brought this trade, this craft over from the old country. And this is how they kept alive, and suddenly they were outlaws. So to me, that was a fascinating story, and trying to get in the heads of these people and the degree to which in Franklin County, the local sheriff and the big people in town were also involved in what happened. So to try to breathe life into this incident and to know the characters. Again, I'm not putting myself in the category of Woody Harrelson, but the degree to which you can understand your characters well enough that you believe you know what they would say in any given circumstance. And I think that there's such incredibly beautiful, rich stories in southwestern Virginia. I think that it's an amazing area I think the stories, there's a wonderful list of the great authors from this area, but still, um, there are more stories to be told. And I was talking to a student um, uh, from this area who was saying, oh, all the stories here are boring. No, 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 no. Trust me, the stories here are beautiful and powerful. And I think that sometimes you need to tell your story to get a little perspective on it. I was telling the students earlier today, I wrote The Glass Castle in 6 weeks, and I spent 5 years rewriting it. And the first time I read it back, I was a little shocked. I didn't realize how dark it was, but telling your story gives you a real perspective on it, and it helps you own these events that had haunted me, The truth is a little bit like a vampire. It sucks the life out of you, but it can exist only in the darkness. And once it's exposed to the light, there's a moment of horror, but then poof, it loses its power over you. And so these things that I used to hate about myself, these things that I thought somehow made me less of a person, now they're either something I went through or something I'm proud of. I can't tell you the number of people who've come up and, literally showed me their scars. And, it's a beautiful thing, but for so long, that was a source of deep, deep shame for me. Um, for a long time, for a while anyway, I was dating this kind of well-to-do gentleman. And I thought once he knows the truth about me, he's going to drop me like a hot potato. His dad was a diplomat, and this is somebody who went to Outward Bound, for gosh. So, I thought once he will not get it. But I thought I should warn him. I said, John, I need to explain to you I had a kind of weird past. He said, how weird? I said, well, when I was 3 years old, my dress caught on fire and I got to get taken to the hospital, get a bunch of skin grafts and stuff like that. And he said, what are you trying to tell me? I said, I'm covered with nasty scars. He said, why are you telling me this? I don't want you buying a pig in a poke, I'm kind of damaged goods here. He said, you're apologizing? He said, oh, no, no. Don't ever apologize for those scars. He said, your scars are a sign that you survived and that you are stronger than whatever you were up against. And I said, I wish I was nice and smooth like other people. And he said, oh, no, smooth is boring. You've got texture. Texture's interesting. So I married him. And yeah. Yeah, he pulled the story. He pretty much hogtied me to the desk, and you are telling this story. But I thought that was about the most beautiful and compassionate thing that I've ever heard. These things we've gone through, there are texture. I thought it was so wise and so profound. Like I said, the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard of. Until one time, I was speaking at an incredibly well-to-do resort. You know, talking major money there. And I told that story about wanting to be nice and smooth. And afterwards, this woman comes up to me and she's all blinged out and perfectly coiffed hair. And she says, sweetie, come here. Let me explain something to you. She said, there is no such thing as smooth. She said, you look close enough, silk's got texture. And I think that's perhaps the wisest and kindest thing anybody ever said to me. My friends, we all have texture. We all have our texture. We all have our scars. And some of us are lucky enough to have the silky texture. And some of us are lucky enough to have texture that's a little bit rougher. Um, and together, all that texture makes this great big crazy quilt of humanity. And what I'm asking of you today is that if you are lucky enough to have that silky texture, don't think that that somehow makes you less strong. And if you are lucky enough to have texture that's a little bit rougher, don't think that that somehow makes you less valuable. It is your texture, they are your scars, they are your stories, and they are whatever you choose to make of them. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we're going to do a little Q&A and ask anything. Nothing embarrasses me. One time I was at an event and somebody said, why did y'all leave Arizona? You had some stability, some security, you had a house. I said, I don't know. And my husband's a talented interviewer and he's asked my mom and he can't get an answer. So I'd answer if I knew, but I don't know the answer. And a woman in the audience raises her hand. She said, I know. I said, how do you know? She said, my book club discussed it. So she had a really good answer too.
All right, I'm ready for our first question. First of all, I want to thank you for finding the courage to tell that story
Oh,
because
thank
that
you.
book has really, really touched me, and I love it. I appreciate it. We lived some of it, and I wanted to ask you about your mother because I know she did move in with you, and my heart goes out to her as well. And I'm wondering, how is she doing?
My mom passed away a couple of years ago. Honestly, it was kind of a good death. She was painting right up until 2 weeks before she died. She and my husband got along great. It was so fascinating to me because I was really terrified of introducing them, and they just sit there discussing literature. And my mother, I didn't realize this until she moved in with us, but she's a hoarder. I didn't realize that because our houses were always burning down. But so that was a little bit of a an issue between us. But my husband said it was really fascinating to me because he discussed it with her, and she found beauty in everything, and she found value in everything. And seeing my mother through his eyes was so clarifying and quite beautiful. So when she passed, she wanted a natural burial. She didn't want to be in some graveyard or anything. And I live in a big old farm, so we found a really pretty place, and it looked kind of lonely to me. And we asked the undertaker, "Is it hard? My father's upstate New York. I haven't visited him. Is it hard to have a body moved?" And he said, "Since COVID, we haven't been able to find somebody to hire to move to do that kind of stuff." And my brother said, "Would you hire me?" And he said, "I will make you an honorary member of the Pretty Funeral Home." So my brother is the best guy in the whole world. He goes up with his pickup and goes and gets Dad, drives him, puts him in the back. Brian said the only weird time was when they went to the taco drive-through, and they got Taco Bell drive-in and got a little side eyes. But so now, Mom and Dad are buried side by side. We got a little park bench, so it's all good. It's all good.
All right, raise your hand, please. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Did you ever get like a real glass castle or your equivalent to a glass
Um,
castle?
well, um, I think that so often the things we think we've lost in life, um, I lost the blueprints. And I spoke at a university where they had an architectural school, and I now have about 30 blueprints for the glass castle. I live in a big old house, and people will come up there and say, "I've got big old windows," and they say, "Oh, this is your glass castle." But I think that what it was more than a physical house was a dream and a hope. And yeah, I got that, so I'm good.
All right. Who's next? Let's see, Sharon. Stand up,
Sharon. I'm a native West Virginian, and
Yay.
we learned growing up was not to get above your raisin.
Yeah.
And also, assuming that maybe a lot of what happened to you was in the 60s and 70s. So there was also the time of the counterculture and against the establishment. And did do you think either of these influenced your parents and their view and way of life, or aside from their own individuality?
Yeah, I was born in 1960, and my parents kind of missed they kind of missed the hippie thing. And I remember my mom saying to me, "Well, hippies, they're good people, but they're just a little confused." So she was not in that category. Um, and they didn't see themselves as counterculture, which is just so weird to me. They just led their life as they saw fit. But what you said about not getting above your station, it's very, very true. But it was just that they were astonishing individualists. One of the great things about having toured West Virginia and this part of Virginia is I've met people who went to school with my father, and they said, "Oh my gosh, he was the smartest person I've ever met," and he was just brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. And you know, um, I've done a lot of thinking and research into the parallels or cruxes between what we call genius and what we call insanity. And again, it was readers who kept on saying, "I believe your father was bipolar." And I was like, "No, Dad was just a drunk." But so many readers said that I started researching it, and uh, some of the things I read really resonated. And I think that maybe the drinking was an attempt to self-medicate. And I wish I'd known that when he was alive because I did not understand why he loved alcohol more than he loved us. But I think I'm kind of getting it. But they were just both so outside the box. I mean, and that's one of the reasons that I wrote, my father, yeah, the alcoholism, the genius, the bipolar, whatever. Um, Mom, she was never diagnosed with anything but the far side of loopy, honey, I got to tell you. And, my husband said, "I've never met anybody like her." She had this, as with many hoarders, she also hoarded information. And she could tell you, I'm the dummy of the family, and that is not false modesty. My family would be having these heated debates about some 16th century artist that I'd never even heard of, and I'm so like, how about that Britney Spears, huh? They knew these things. How do you know these things? Oh, I read it, and they would keep these things forever. So mom was also astonishingly brilliant, but just didn't want to live by the rules that other people did. And my husband, he really grew to love and appreciate her. His mother is the complete opposite, but he has said it must have been really hard to live with her. It was really, and as an adult, I was able to appreciate what an individual she was. Did not have a maternal bone in her body, honey. I got to tell you, she just did not. Taking care of kids, it was just not on the agenda. And that's okay now. It wasn't okay then. There were three of us girls, and none of us had children. My brother has two. So I think that's not a coincidence. But um, she just wasn't interested, and her grandchildren. She wasn't interested in them either. It's just the way she is. And I was telling the students earlier today. Some readers get mad at me that I'm not angrier with mom and dad, but they are who they are, and I believe they gave me gifts. And I can get angry that they didn't give me what I wanted at the time, but I think I am the luckiest human being in the world. I really do. I think I cannot believe how fortunate I am standing up here talking to you all today, being able to do what I love, reading and writing and talking to people and meeting people and hearing their stories. So I didn't get what I wanted at the time, but I got incredible gifts. And I'm just very, very grateful for that.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Mine's a very personal impression of your book, and what I came away with after reading that book wasn't the same story of dysfunction as what you told, and there's so many different stories. But what I came away with was permission to love in spite of it all. And I thank you for that.
Now you're gonna make me cry here. It's just so interesting to me. People come away with different stories, and the Glass Castle. Like I said, the most wonderful thing that's happened to it and to me is it being read in schools, but it's also been banned in some schools, and that just breaks my heart because the number of kids who've come up and told me, I thought I was the only one who lived like this. I thought I was alone. You have made me see that just because we got an old beater of a car and my dad is a meth addict, that is not that does not predestine me to be the same. And you know, first of all, thank you for that lovely comment. Thank you. It means the world to me. Like I said, it is so fascinating to me to sit in on conversations where somebody like you will get in an argument with somebody who says that my parents were horrible and should have been locked up. And honestly, it doesn't upset me to hear that when people say, your parents are, I wouldn't have let my children play with kids like you. Fine, that's fine. That's your opinion, and that is democracy. That is the world we live in. That is humanity. We disagree. We agree to disagree. We hear other people's stories. We consider that. I disagree with you, or I agree with you. This is what I get from it. That is how we learn. That is how we grow. And there are so many beautiful voices, and I'm just so honored that my voice is being heard. And it breaks my heart that some people say this is a dangerous voice to be heard because, and I get it. I get it. People want to protect their children. And, there's some wicked stuff in my book about creepy uncles. But because of that scene about my creepy uncle exposing himself, it got banned in a very posh suburb, a very well-to-do town. And uh, one parent objected to it, and the other parents and the teachers, and God bless them, the students, got together and said, we need to know about people like this. We're so privileged. We need to know that people like this exist. So they got the book unbanned, and they invited me to come talk to them. And a fellow author told me, "Oh, don't talk to those kids. I had to talk to them one time. They're a bunch of spoiled brats. You'll hate them." We had an amazing conversation about children and parents, and what do parents owe their children, what do children, and what does society owe poor people, and what do poor people owe. It was a beautiful conversation. I loved it. But one student hung back and wanted to thank me in private and said, "My creepy uncle exposed himself to me, and your story gave me courage to tell about it." So we poor folk have not cornered the market on creepy uncles, and and what my story does is not just give permission to be grateful, but it's also permission to say, I don't have to put up with that. I don't have to, to voice your concern, to voice who you are, to be everything you can be. And don't let your circumstances define you. Take those circumstances and put them to work for you. Be everything that you can be, and don't let anybody hold you back, because it is your story and your journey that makes you so special. Do we have time for one more?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
Yes.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I remember you.
I know that a lot of individuals, including myself, find a various meanings to your specific name and your stories. And I just wanted to ask, what do you feel from your name? What gives you that sort of individuality that gives you the courage to do things like this?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That gives me the courage to.
To speak in front of large audiences, to write your stories. What makes your name stand out to you?
I guess it is the realization. First of all, thank you for a very intense, beautiful question. Um, we are what we are. Accept it and embrace it. The truth is very, very powerful if you can own it. It's very scary if you run from it and try to make it something that it's not. And twisting it and gaslighting yourself and others is exhausting. But in Hang the Moon, my latest book, um, the character one night she's going through a tough time, and she's sitting out in the darkness and looking up at the stars and thinking how great it is that the stars are out. And then she realizes the stars are always out. It just takes the darkness for you to be able to see them. And so, even not just even in the darkness, but especially in the darkness, that that is when certain kinds of beauty really become obvious. You need the dark of night to see stars by their own light. And so don't be afraid of the darkness. Don't be afraid of these bad things that happen to you. I'm not going to say because there's a reason, but it's why I've always loved the truth, and why even in my fiction I always turn to the truth. What what would really happen? Why did this happen? Most people in the world are not villains. I don't think my parents were villains. I mean, some people think that they were, but they were damaged. They had their own problems. Even my creepy uncle, he had issues. And being able to confront that and own it and make it your own, then it stops being scary. Then once if you can face the truth and own it, that's a very powerful thing. And you don't have to pretend you're all la-di-da, or you don't have to go to restaurants and pretend that you know what everything on the menu is. You are who you are. Exploit the bejesus out of that and own it, and don't try to be anything that you're not, which doesn't mean that you can't change and embrace other things. I mean, like I said, I used to think I was not a fiction writer. Don't limit the definition of yourself, because that's who you are. But don't be afraid to go to those other places. But also, don't be afraid of the power and the beauty of your own story. Thank you. I think we're done. Thank you so much. Y'all are fabulous. Thank you.
All right, hang out just a little bit longer. Miss Walls is going to be signing books for us, but we have a very important thing to do now, and that's announce our poetry and short story winners. Now, before she leaves the stage, just want to say that was so inspiring, didn't you think? So inspiring. My own personal story after reading her book, I don't know about you, but I've never been able to pick a chicken the same. In her book, she talks about um, fixing a chicken, I think, right? She was at a guest house and the guest asked her to clean the chicken. And every time I clean a chicken, I think about how lucky I am and I save whatever you can off the chicken, right? That's depression era kind of stuff. But I remember her book and talking about how she was hungry, and I never ever take that for granted. That I could waste part of the chicken, I guess, but no, you save every bit. So maybe now you'll go home, you'll never clean the chicken the same again. So thank you, Miss Walls. Thank you for such an inspiring story. And if you leave here today and you don't feel like you've heard something important, girl, don't come back. This is great. This is the kind of stuff that we need to be doing. We need to be talking. We need to be reading. We need to educate ourselves and support each other. Thank you, Jeannette, for your inspiration and continued dedication to providing a true picture of life in Appalachia. So at this time, I'm going to ask Dr. Pinion to come up, and we're going to present the winners of the Lonesome Pine Literary Contest. And I'm going to help you do that, okay? All right.
All the feels, right, from that conversation. All right. It's my pleasure to announce the winners of the 38th Annual Lonesome Pine Short Story Contest. In the middle school category of the short story contest, our third place winner is Adeline Wallace, a student at J.W. Adams Combined School, Pound, Virginia, for her story titled The Webs. Our second place winner is Evelyn Clark, a student from Union Middle School, Big Stone Gap, Virginia, for her story Nightmare Before Valentine's.
If you're here, you need to come up, but if you're not, that's okay.
Oh, here comes a student. All right. Over there. Our first place winner is Emily Short, a student at J.W. Adams Combined School, Pound, Virginia, for her story titled Here We Go Again. In the high school category of the short story contest, our third place winner in the high school category is Sienna Brooks, a student at John I. Burton High School in Norton, Virginia, for her story Pigeon Baby. Our second place winner in the high school category is Kaylee Hoffman, a student at John I. Burton High School in Norton, Virginia, for her story Together Always. Our first place winner in the high school category is Nina Fialova, a student at Central High School in Wise, for her story Marit's Medallion. Oh, accepting on her behalf is her mother. In the adult category of the short story contest, our third place winner in the adult category is Peter Wallace of Cambridge, Wisconsin, for his story Adjacent Booths. He's not here today. Our second place winner in the adult category is James Ryan of Big Stone Gap, Virginia, for his story, Witch House. Our first place winner in the adult category is Matthew Stanley for his story, Fiddlin' Around. I'll now welcome Dr. Greer to announce the winners of the poetry contest.
Switch out here. Okay, ready? In our middle school category, for our poetry contest, our second place winner is Leah Hilton, a student at Union Middle School in Big Stone Gap, for her story titled, I Am Just a Girl. I'm guessing Leah's not here, right? Okay. Oh, yay. Great. Thank you so much. Okay. Our first place winner is Adrian Potter, a student at J.W. Adams Combined School in Pound, for her story titled A Break. Congratulations. In the high school category for our poetry contest, our third place winner is Adriana Annie Barnett, a student at John I. Burton High School in Norton, Virginia, for her story, Drip. Yay! Congratulations. You're not at Norton, you're at Lee, right? Thank you. Okay. I knew that. Congratulations, Adriana. Our second place winner in the high school category is Kyla Parsons, a student at John I. Burton High School, for her story, Who I Am. Okay. Our first place winner in the high school category is Laura Diane Al-Arab. I know I butchered that. I'm so sorry. A student at John I. Burton High School. She's recognized for her work titled Between Two Worlds. Do not leave here. Come on. Pronounce your name correctly for me. I want to make sure we get it right.
My name is Laura Diab Arab.
See, I couldn't have done that at all. Congratulations. All right, in the adult category of our poetry contest, our third place winner is Danita Ratliff Kennedy of Kingsport, Tennessee, for her work, Gentle as a Storm. Congratulations. Yay, Sissy. Our second place winner in the adult category is Joseph Bricky of Jonesboro, Tennessee, for his work, Ancestors. Is Joseph here with us? Okay. And then our first place winner in the adult category is by Sharon Waters of Beckley, West Virginia. She's here. Yay! for Sharon is being recognized for her work titled Make Me a Rubber Band. That's wonderful. Let's give a warm round of applause for all of our short story and poetry contest winners. We're going to ask you guys, when we dismiss, if you don't care, all of the winners, will you please gather outside of the fireplace here? And we're going to take your picture, if that's okay. And of course, to give you a little publicity, congratulations again. Just a few short announcements. This sounds so country to say it, but I have to say it. So, if you're going to the Fox House for lunch, our host asks that you please use the restroom here at the, it's right outside the door here. They only have one bathroom and there's 46 people. So, you know, when I said it's so country, it is so country, but it's a good thing, right? So use the bathroom here if you don't care before you go down there. It will make life happier for everybody. I hope that you have enjoyed this year's author presentation. I know I did. That was wonderful. And that you will enjoy reading the winning entries of our writing contest. If you've made a reservation for lunch and you don't know how to get there, please see me or Megan Gibson in the back here. We'll give you directions for how to get to the Fox House. And then I'm sure Miss Walls is waiting to anxiously sign your books. Okay. If you've enjoyed this program today, we ask that you consider making a donation to the Mountain Empire Community College Cultural and Humanities Fund, which provides programming to include this festival, hang out, y'all, music school, home craft days, and other events. We don't do this for free. It costs to bring programs like this to our region. So any donation that you can give would be much appreciated. Again, I thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting Mountain Empire Community College and have a wonderful day. Thank you.